what's up, everybody? It's JT Sports Max, you guys, with another video. And I'm here with the Pittsburgh Steelers 2019 wide receiver preview. Going to be going through all of the wide receivers currently on the Pittsburgh Steelers roster. And for those of you guys who haven't seen my previous Pittsburgh Steelers preview, I previewed the Pittsburgh Steelers halfbacks. So it will be a card and a link to that video if you guys want to go ahead and check that out. And also make sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel. I upload NFL videos and NFL content daily. Upload at least 2 videos daily, sometimes even 3 and 4. So make sure to subscribe if you are a fan of the NFL and like watching NFL videos and content. So the Pittsburgh Steelers wide receiver core, a lot of people are talking down on it just because they lost Antonio Brown. Antonio Brown, he is a loss. But they do have other talented wide receivers on this roster, such as JUJU Smith-Schuster. A lot of people think he's not going to be good simply for the fact because Antonio Brown was drawing double teams and JUJU Smith-Schuster was benefiting off that. I think that's a load of crap. JUJU Smith-Schuster is one of the best young receivers in the game, and he's going to end up being a very good #1 wide receiver for the Pittsburgh Steelers. And also, people seem to forget the fact that good receivers come and go out of Pittsburgh. They had guys like Santonio Holmes, they had Emmanuel Sanders, Mike Wallace. So the Pittsburgh Steelers are one of the best teams in the NFL and developing good wide receivers. And also, people forget this is what separates the Pittsburgh Steelers and the New England Patriots from the rest of the teams in the NFL because they don't get tied to just one player. The way they look at, despite how good you are, you're replaceable, and that's the mindset that you have to have in the NFL if you want to have success. You have New York Giants fans crying over trading away Odell Beckham, even though it hasn't been the team in the last decade to win the Super Bowl with a top 5 wide receiver. So the Pittsburgh Steelers wide receiving core is very good. Maybe not as good as it was last season with Antonio Brown, but it's still a very good roster of wide receivers on this team. So the first guy that we're going to be talking about is wide receiver DeOntae Johnson. Now the Pittsburgh Steelers selected him in this year's NFL draft. He played for the University of Toledo, and he was regarded by a lot of NFL analysts and draft experts as one of the best route runners in this year's draft class. And the Pittsburgh Steelers, they drafted him pretty early. They drafted him in the first couple of rounds on the NFL draft, and he was very solid for the University of Toledo. His favorite game of mine was when he played against the Miami Hurricanes. Now, the Miami Hurricanes had a lot of defensive backs that ended up being drafted in this year's NFL draft, and that was his best game. He torched that Miami Hurricanes secondary, which was one of the best secondaries in all of college football. And I think he's going to be pretty good for the Pittsburgh Steelers. He has solid hands, good route running. And like I said earlier, he was one of the best route runners in this year's draft. Now, normally rookie wide receivers, I don't really expect a lot of rookie wide receivers because normally they tend to be very inconsistent. So I don't expect to see a lot of Deontay Johnson. Maybe not until later on in the season, probably around week 12, week 13 is probably when we could start seeing a bit more of Deontay Johnson. I'm not saying that he's not going to get a couple of plays during the start of the regular season, like the first couple of games, but normally rookie wide receivers don't start coming on until later on in the NFL season. So I think Deontay Johnson will have somewhat of an impact, but just not a big impact in his rookie season for the Steelers. Next up, we have another wide receiver who I'm very excited for in Deontay Spencer. Now, for those of you guys who don't watch the Canadian Football League, Deontay Spencer was one of the best wide receivers in the CFL. When he played for the Ottawa Red Blacks, he was cut because he requested to be cut because he was receiving a lot of attention, a lot of NFL buzz and hype from other NFL teams, not just the Pittsburgh Steelers. So this is a pretty good signing for the Pittsburgh Steelers. And this is a guy who I feel has a very good chance of making the roster for the Pittsburgh Steelers because for CFL, he was a 2-time CFL East All-Star. And he also is very fast. He can return kicks, he can return punts. He's room to have 4.3 speed. He's a very solid route runner. He's a very good deep threat as well. And the Pittsburgh Steelers, we love throwing the ball deep. Big Ben, that's one of his best traits is his ability to throw a very good deep ball. So we need more wide receivers that has very good route running, very good hands. He's also very good catching the ball in traffic as well and has a very good release. And I think he could end up being a slot receiver for the Pittsburgh Steelers because that is an open competition for the Pittsburgh Steelers. It's that slot receiver position with guys like Eli Rogers and Ryan Switzer. So I think Deontay Spencer is a very talented wide receiver, and I think he's has an above average chance of making the Pittsburgh Steelers roster. And this guy was not getting attention from the Pittsburgh Steelers. He was getting attention from a lot of NFL teams. So this guy is very sought after, and I think he's going to end up making this roster. And I wouldn't be surprised if he ends up making a considerable impact for this Pittsburgh Steelers team in 2019 if he makes the roster. The next guy that we have on this list is wide receiver DONTE Moncrief. Now, he played for the Jacksonville Jaguars last season, had 668 receiving yards, 48 receptions, and 3 touchdowns. And Blake Bortles and the Cody Kesslers of the world held him back. Blake Bortles, the only thing he can throw is a crossing route. Other than that, he's pretty much ineffective. So he held back DONTE Moncrief a lot. But with the Pittsburgh Steelers, playing with a quarterback like Big Ben, DONTE Moncrief has an opportunity to thrive this season. And he has an opportunity to start because that second wide receiver spot isn't really set in stone. James Washington is the favorite to start there, but I wouldn't be surprised if we see DONTE Moncrief get a considerable amount of targets this season as well. And he's a very talented wide receiver. He has good size, good speed for his size as well. So I can see him being utilized on the red zone a lot. And also, he's a very good deep threat as well with how big he is. And he's very good at catching 50-50 balls. We didn't really get a chance to see that with the Jacksonville Jaguars because Blake Bortles couldn't really throw any 50-50 balls. So DONTE Moncrief is another guy that I'm excited about for this Pittsburgh Steelers wide receiving core. Next up, we have wide receiver Eli Rogers. Now, he was injured for most of the season for the Pittsburgh Steelers. And when he did come back, he only played in about a couple of games. He had 79 receiving yards, 12 receptions, and 0 touchdowns. Now, Eli Rogers is a guy that he has a lot of pressure on him this season because he's going to be competing with Ryan Switzer and for that starting slot receiver role. Now, I don't really know who I like starting for that wide receiver slot role for the Pittsburgh Steelers. I believe Ryan Switzer and Eli Rogers are both capable guys. Eli Rogers, he has better hands than Ryan Switzer, in my opinion, and he also has a little bit more experience in the Pittsburgh Steelers system than Ryan Switzer. But ultimately, I think it's anybody's job, basically. It's not really set in stone. But Eli Rogers, I'm expecting a lot out of him this season. I think he's a very solid slot wide receiver when he's able to stay healthy. And the next guy that we have on this list is wide receiver James Washington. Now, James Washington didn't really have a good rookie season. And I think that's pretty much you can't really hold that against them because a lot of rookie wide receivers end up struggling their first season in the NFL. Some of them even struggle for their first couple of years in the league. So James Washington, I'm expecting him to bounce back in 2019. 2018, he had 217 receiving yards, caught 16 passes, had 1 touchdown, and he really struggled. He struggled with drops, he struggled with consistency, and although Big Ben called him out, I believe Big Ben called him out after that Denver Broncos game. Big Ben still raised about James Washington. I think James Washington is going to end up being a breakout star for the Pittsburgh Steelers this season. Next up, we have wide receiver Johnny Holton. Now, Johnny Holton, he played for the Oakland Raiders for 2 seasons. He ended up getting signed by the Oakland Raiders in 2016, and he caught 3 touchdown passes for them in 2017. Now, last season, he didn't really appear in any games, and they tried to convert him into a cornerback. He also had a brief stint with the Philadelphia Eagles after he was released by the Oakland Raiders. Then he got released by the Philadelphia Eagles before getting signed by the Pittsburgh Steelers. Now, Johnny Holton is another fast guy. I think if he makes the roster, he'll probably won't get a lot of playing time. And if he does make the roster, he will most likely be a special teamer. Next up, we have the guy who needs no introduction, wide receiver JUJU Smith-Schuster. Last season, he had a breakout year for the Steelers, catching 1,426 1,426 receiving yards, had 111 receptions, and also had 17 touchdown passes. Juju Smith-Schuster is going to emerge as a top 10 wide receiver. Record it, mark it down, save the video, do whatever you have to do, because I said it. Juju Smith-Schuster is going to be a top 10 wide receiver in the NFL after this season. And I mean, a lot of people keep on saying that Antonio Brown was a big reason for Juju Smith-Schuster's success, but Juju Smith-Schuster was getting his good amount of double teams as well. So Juju Smith-Schuster, this guy is one of my favorite wide receivers, one of my favorite players in the NFL. He's just one of those guys who just love being around in the locker room. And a lot of people really love Juju Smith-Schuster. So Juju Smith-Schuster is a guy who I'm expecting to have a very big year for the Pittsburgh Steelers. Next up, we have wide receiver Ryan Switzer. Now, Ryan Switzer was acquired in a trade, and I can't remember the team that the Pittsburgh Steelers traded for the trade. I think it was, I forgot which team it was that traded for him, but Ryan Switzer had his best career with the Pittsburgh Steelers, and he had 253 receiving yards, 36 receptions, and 1 touchdown. And he proved that he can be more than just a returner. And in my opinion, I think he will be the starter come 2019 in that starting slot receiver role, because I really like what I saw out of Ryan Switzer. Now, although the stats might not be flashy, Ryan Switzer had a lot of good plays for the Pittsburgh Steelers and a lot of clutch catches on third down for the Pittsburgh Steelers. So he's my favorite to start for the Pittsburgh Steelers this season at that slot wide receiver position. And I'm looking forward to seeing what he does. I think he's going to have a pretty big season. I think a lot of people are sleeping on Ron Switzer coming into 2019. Next up, we have wide receiver TEVIN Jones. Now, TEVIN Jones was an undrafted free agent in 2016 out of the University of Memphis. He was signed by the Houston Texans. He was on their practice squad for a year, got released in 2017. Later on, got picked up by the Kansas City Chiefs that year, was on their practice squad, then got released then. Then 2018, he was picked up by the Pittsburgh Steelers. He was on our practice squad for basically the whole entire season. Now, this guy, I don't know if he'll make the roster, but he does have nice size. He's 6'2", 225 pounds. So if he makes the roster, it'll most likely be on special teams. Next up, we have wide receiver TREY. Now, TREY is the son of Baseball Hall of Famer Ken Griffey Jr. He had brief stints with the Miami Dolphins and the Indianapolis Colts. He played for Arizona. I really like the film that he had, and I think he's another guy who, if he makes the roster, it will be on special teams. And he needs a little bit more development, but overall, I think he has a pretty solid chance of making the roster. So this is it for the 2019 wide receiver preview for the Pittsburgh Steelers. Let me know what you guys think about this down in the comment section down below. Also, comment some other teams that you guys want me to do, comment the position for that team, and also make sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel for more NFL videos and content. And thanks for watching.